testing procedure of the study. How exactly was Alex tested on the concept of same and different? So basically, to prevent trainer induced cueing, which is like more of like a researcher bias, Alex was tested on the concept of same and different and various other concepts by a secondary trainer, not the principal trainer herself, which was Irene. So what exactly happened is that on the day prior to testing, a student who would not be involved in training nor in testing, he would just like randomly like order all the questions, and I randomly order all the pair of the objects that were previously listed by the principal trainer, and he would just randomly order all the questions as well. So like neither Irene or neither the parrot Alex would like know on which day, on which topic, which question could appear. So this uh, improved the validity of the study, the internal validity of the study, that there was no researcher bias and there was no expectation queuing as well. So all the answers were completely valid and were not like, it wasn't like that Alex had a hint, okay, this question might come, or Irene might could not have given him a hint or something. So let's move on to the questions that were asked. Um, uh, as alongside the same and different questions, Alex was also tested on like numerous other concepts. He was tested on numerical concepts by being asked how many. Like, he would be shown a collection of objects and he would be asked how many. And he could also be tested on various other concepts like the color, the shape. He would be asked what color, what shape, what's this, and yeah, so he doesn't get bored or he does not forget all the other concepts that he has learned. So to maintain that, um, he was tested on various concepts other than just same and different. Questions were asked 1 to 4 times on average per week, and the training lasted from February till the April, I believe. Um, so, what exactly happened in the testing room? The principal trainer would sit in the corner of a room, but her back would be turned towards the parrot. So the parrot could not see her. He could not see her face while he was answering the questions that were being asked by the secondary trainer. All right. So if Alex gave a correct response, the principal trainer would repeat out his response aloud. So then he would be praised and then he would be rewarded with both of the objects or one of the objects or a material or a collection of objects depending on the question, right? But if he answered incorrectly, then the secondary trainer would turn around, then he would remove the object from his side and he would turn around and he would say emphatically no, and the object would be presented again. So this was employed again and again until he gave the correct response. However, the first trial correct response was considered for his significance. It's not like they did not consider the first trial response at all, but they also counted the number of correction procedures for each trial. So that was considered as well. Okay, how many times he is answering incorrectly and how many times we are putting in the correction procedure, right? So this just reinforced Alex's thinking that okay, if if I say the name of the object that I actually want instead of the object that's being presented to me, then that's not fruitful at all, right? So he might want another object that other than the one that's being presented to him, right? So that's so for example, he might want like a pink wooden triangle, but he's instead being presented with a five corner height, right? So maybe he's being presented with that, but he instead says pink wooden triangle. So that's incorrect, right? So that was just like reinforcing his thinking that just he should just say the name of the objects that's being presented to him, so he can get the object, so he can request an alternative objects that he prefers, right? So like going back to one of our videos, and like let's just bring that in back, that Alex had the liberty to ask for alternative objects if he was not interested in the object that was being presented to him, right? So test scores were obtained by dividing the number of total corrections by the number of correct identifications made by the total number of presentations. So this is a mathematical way of they are quantifying their results, which also increases the reliability of the study, that we have quantitative data and we are not just relying on qualitative data. So yep, let's move on to the next slide. All right. So let's move on to the test on familiar objects. These trials involved object pairs that were similar to but never the same as those used in training. Right? So these objects were never used in training, but they were similar to the ones that were used in training. Um, um, it is quite possible that one of the objects, like in a pair, one of the objects might have been used in the training, but the pair itself would always be novel, right? So like the pair itself would not be repeated. The individual objects in the pair could have been repeated in the study, but the pair itself would have never been repeated in the study, right? And let's move on to the transfer test with novel objects. And these were the kind of the objects that were never even used in training, or like or they might not be even familiar or similar to the ones used in training. Like Alex would not be familiar with these objects. He might not even know the labels of several attributes of the objects, right? So for example, he's being presented with a pink woolen pom pom, right? That's something that's literally not in his label repertoire. It's not there, right? So we just wanted to know if he could generalize that concept of same and different on novel objects, because at the end of the day we are testing the concept itself rather than like making him learn the labels for categories of specific objects. We want him to generalize that even if he does not know particular color labels or shape labels or material labels, right? But also maintaining the ethics of the study, they made sure that Alex was not scared of the objects, right? So for that, what they made sure is that, okay, if the object was completely novel, if the object was something that Alex had never seen before, or like he had the potential to be scared of, that object would be kept in the laboratory like a few days prior to testing, so like so like Alex can see the object and can feel comfortable around it by the time the testing begins. All right, so let's move on to probes. Probes were basically all right, so probes were basically a pair of two objects for which two categories could be the possible answers. So we were scared that the principal trainers were scared that Alex might have been responding on the basis of what he was seeing rather than actually hearing the question. Like for example, he would have been shown a pink wooden triangle and he would have been shown a yellow wooden triangle, right? So now that he's looking at the objects, he's seeing that, okay, only one thing is different. So the question that they might be asking me must be, what is different, right? So Exactly. So to make sure that that's not happening, they asked probes. Probes were kind of like objects or the questions that could have two possible answers instead of one. And he could, if he responded on the basis of the attributes itself, then he could have one wrong answer. So for example, let's take the same example I told you, which was the pink wooden triangle and the yellow wooden triangle. So the question might ask what is same, right? Then he has two possible correct answers. One is the material, which is wooden, and second is the shape, which is triangle, right? So he has two possible answers to that. So these were administered regularly to make sure that we were not going off track and Alex was actually responding on the basis of same and different. Alright, so the results. Training for the labels of shape and color took around 4 months. The label of material took around 9 months. This was not because of his ability or like a lack of ability, or maybe this is not a judge of that, because we have to also consider that Alex at the same time of this study was being tested on like numerous other studies and concepts, and because he was just like a, like a Michael Jackson of the animal research world. So at the same time, he was being tested on various other concepts and studies other than same and different. So that's why the label of material took 9 months for him to acquire. So the test on familiar objects, Alex's score was 76.6 for all trials plus correction procedures, and it was 69.7 for first trial only response, only performance, and transfer test with novel objects. His score was 85% and 82.3%. So the reason that Alex scored higher on the transfer test with novel objects rather than the familiar objects, because is that, remember that Alex was being rewarded with the objects that were being presented to him? Exactly. So that was an incentive. That was an incentive for Alex to answer correctly and answer and be interested in the objects that are being presented to him. Obviously, if he is being presented with novel objects, then he would be more interested in them than the familiar objects, which is why he responded um, more correctly on novel objects rather than familiar objects, because he was more interested in novel objects and he was just interested in their use. Like he would sometimes use something to chew, he would sometimes use something to scratch his back, scratch himself, or he would use something for preening as well. So those objects were really valuable for him. And we were also sure that Alex was responding on the basis of the question itself rather than the attributes. So because his score was 90.2 on all trials for probes, which is why this study is highly valid in terms of internal validity, right? Because Alex was completely trained on same and different concept and was demonstrating that. So that's all for today. I will see you in one of my next videos. Bye.